Sports for Real again with Coach Hall. The year was 1980. That's the year that I started to realize all the stuff that was happening around me and in the world. When the year started, I was just 8 years old. You know how 8 years old people are. They don't pay much attention to what's going on around them. But then I started to notice things. Just sitting around talking to your mother and news pop up. They had that Iranian hostage crisis that lasted 444 days into 1980. That was a big thing. Very first thing I noticed. The next thing, I saw Darrell Griffith, also known as Dr. Duncanstein, take Louisville to the NCAA championship with a 59-54 victory over UCLA. Next, in May of that year, a ship hit the southbound support beams of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge outside Tampa that knocked a section of the road deck out and sent 35 people to their deaths. That was brutal. But good news wise, locally, our track team, Black High, won state championship. They would repeat that feat in 81, but the best thing, they come back and they started the football season that fall. One other thing that happened in 1980 I need to talk about is the U.S. boycotting the Olympics. Kind of tied up with that Iran situation, as a sideline, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. And that led the U.S. and several other nations to boycott that event. Now, if you look forward into the future, you know what happened when the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. So we're going to leave that right there where it is. Next, the football season started with all the excitement going on around town after winning the track championship. They opened the season up against Gainesville on the road. Knocked them off. That propelled them to go all the way through the season and finishing that season on a high by stomping St. Augustine 64-6. You don't know, Pike and St. Augustine never got along in nothing, and to stomp a team like that in football was outstanding. Now, St. Augustine has returned the favor several times over the years, and right now they're completely dominating the series. But that's another story. But the wheels started to fall off, or fell off drastically, in the first round of the playoffs. In came Jacksonville Lee. Jacksonville Lee, led by Corky Rogers, who gained a whole lot of fame at bowls before he finally gave it up. He's deceased now, but he had a great career coaching football. In '79, they had lost to Milton 41-7, and Milton went on to win their second championship in a row. So anytime that you get a program going and you start to go to the playoffs and you feel like you're going to have an opportunity to win the state championship. Now, one other note, Lee made their first appearance in '77. That is the same year that Palaca High School opened its doors. They won 10 straight district championships, the first school to do so, which is a great feat. Why is it great? Because those are all local neighborhood kids. Nowadays, you have these private schools and other schools are winning district championships left and right, but they aren't homegrown kids. They are imported from somewhere else. So there's a completely different accomplishment. So Lee comes in, playoff season, ready to go, and for what I understand, they were very, very big. So big that I found out later that our team, being the first time in this situation, they were afraid. And Lee did whatever they wanted to do that night. A local hero did catch a little swing pass right before halftime and took that in for a touchdown, but that was it for that night. They ended up losing 30-7. Lee, they continue on. They got the rematch with Milton, and this time they blew Milton out. I believe they shut them out 26-0, I think. I got to go back and double check that. Then they get into the playoffs, and who's there? Gainesville High School. Now let's go back. Remember I told you that Palaca beat Gainesville to open up the 1980 season. What we didn't know at the time is their coach, James Neblack, he made them practice after that game was over because I guess they felt like they were the better team and they had no business losing to a team like Palaca. So they went to practice that night right after the game, which a lot of teams used to do. I don't think that would go over too well now, but yes, that happened back then. And they ended up rearranging their offense, and it kind of took off. They didn't take off right away, but they took a couple games of jail and they started to get better and better and better, and they made it all the way to the semifinals. Well, Lee, as we found out, that this just happens to be the best team that Lee ever had. But Gainesville, they were so determined to advance that they were back and forth with Lee all night. Now, one other note, this game here was played at Florida Field on a Saturday night, not at Citizens Field where Gainesville usually plays. I don't know how big the crowd was that night, but yes, they played at Florida Field on the turf. Nobody complained about that. But anyway, game came down to a fourth down, fourth and goal. Gainesville stuffed Lee and turned them back. And they ended up winning that game 21-15. Now, Lee getting stuck on a fourth and short or trying to convert, that became a common theme with this team during the 10-year district championship run that they had. And I'll talk about that later, about how costly those conversions came to be for that particular program. Gainesville just happens to go on and knock off Titusville on the road 21, I think it was 21-15 also. And they ended up winning the state championship that year. Now, back to Palatka. You're sitting there watching Gainesville win the state championship, and you know in your heart Gainesville can't beat you. No matter what kind of changes they made, you still got the same kind of athletes on the field. Gainesville won the championship, and that was one of the things that propelled the team to come together and get as good as they were the next year. They opened up the season against Gainesville, and it was a tough game, but Palatka pulled away to win that game 28-21. They only gave up 67 points en route to a 14-0 season, but Gainesville, having that heart of a champion, still thinking that they were better than Palatka, they came in and acted like it, but Panthers held them off, and that led them all the way to their 14-0 season and state championship. But it's just football stories, and full of them, especially when you start talking about the early 80s of Palatka High School. And I just wanted to share that with you. Sports for real.